Mark Vandermaas. He's from London, Ontario, outsider, but he's insider with me. He's the editor of Voice of Canada. Welcome, Mark Vandermaas.
You know, Merlin talked a few minutes ago about serving in the military on a peacekeeping mission. He's actually a Korean War veteran. I was a former soldier myself. I served on a peacekeeping mission in Egypt, in a place now where there is civil war because there's no rule of law. That was a long time ago, and about a year and a half ago, I saw a community being ripped apart because there was no law here. And when I first heard about Pam Dancer, as we call her, because she likes to dance, about children being afraid in their homes, having to take medication and go to counseling because the police won't protect them, it just appalled me. I went 8,000 miles across the world to do a small part in the service of peace, and yet an hour and a half from where I live, there's a young lady who doesn't feel safe in her home. I don't care whether I'm an outsider. I will not stand by and allow that to happen. Thank you. I've never believed that the violent extremists who have terrorized Caledonia and other towns in Ontario represented all Native people. And in all the months that I've been involved in this struggle to restore the rule of law, I have never met a single person who believed that either. In fact, during my meeting with the Solicitor General's office regarding my complaints against OPP Commissioner Julian Fantino, I told Mr. Quinter's consultant that I thought the biggest mistake the government and the OPP were making was treating a relatively small group of extremists as though they spoke for all honorable Native people. The story, however, thank you. The story, however, goes much, much deeper than that, deeper than merely recognizing that Native people as a group are not criminals or victimizers of innocent residents. For many months now, we have tried to share the reality that Native people themselves are victims of two-tier justice, a fact that has been consistently unreported by non-Native media. The same race-based policies and procedures implemented by the OPP in Caledonia and endorsed by the official Ipperwash Inquiry Report as, quote, best practices, the same policies that cause OPP officers to violate the rights of non-natives and allow Native criminals to escape justice are actually responsible for victimizing Native people themselves. Let me give you some examples. Number one, the Ipperwash Inquiry Report describes how children were deliberately used to assault Camp Ipperwash in July 1995. Here's some quotes from that, directly from the report. Harley George, a 15-year-old boy, was instructed to drive the yellow school bus into the barracks with children as passengers. The bus belonged to Warren George, Harley's father. They range in age from 11 to 16 years, with the exception of one person who is in their 20s. Harley turned the bus around, backed it through the gate, breaking the chain lock. The children heard glass smash and fall to the floor of the bus. Harley George pulled up to the door of the drill hall and began to push it in with the bus. We're talking about a 15-year-old kid, remember. Harley backed the bus into the Jeep, pushing it for about 40 to 45 feet. The bus hit the military vehicle with a fair amount of force. That's straight out of the Ipperwash report. Example number two. The investigation that we did, that we took to Queen's Park on March 14th of this year, that became the Ipperwash Papers, taught us a number of very, very important lessons. One of them is that two-tier justice was likely the cause of Dudley George's death. In March 1996, the town of Beausanquet, formerly Lambton Shores, wrote a victim impact statement to a Justice Robert Reed that contained some revelations. And I should note, by the way, Justice Reed had the same job that David Crombie has today. Today, hundreds of residents wrote victim impact statements to him. To this day, nobody knows what happened to them. We happen to get 33 of them. And in this letter, the township said the following: the Department of National Defense through its failure to remove illegal occupiers, failure to permit the law to be upheld, failure to protect its boundaries, created a situation that led to the death of at least one individual, the takeover and destruction of public property, terrorizing of a municipality, destruction of property values, and the tearing apart of a community and its way of life. Does that sound familiar?
I thought you were talking about Ipperwash.
That was Ipperwash. In other words, in the opinion of the township, Dudley George died, and Ipperwash was terrorized because of a failure to enforce the law in the early years prior to Mr. George's death, when the situation was not as dangerous. As we've recently seen in Caledonia, OPP policies allow a peaceful land claim to escalate month after month until extreme violence is occurring, and then, and only then, do they act. Example number 3. Native elders Clifford George, Rose Manning, and Nellie Rogers, who were among the original Ipperwash occupiers, told the Sarnia Observer in 1998 that they were, quote, harassed and intimidated into leaving the former Camp Ipperwash by a small band of younger natives who think they're in charge of the place. They threatened us with guns and said I had to leave. She described the former camp as a lawless land, and Rose Manning's house was later burnt down in retaliation for speaking out. Example number 4 is occurring right here in Caledonia. According to the Turtle Island News, the Douglas Creek Estates was eventually taken over by uncontrollable use. Here are some quotes from an article published in May of this year. Quote, a young man is recovering from neck injuries after he was struck by a crowbar. Quote, a 19-year-old man has been kicked off the site for 2 weeks for striking the other youth after first throwing a brick through the window of the home he was staying in. That same man also lit up a joint in front of a Turtle Island news reporter. A number of long-term supporters have left the site, citing concerns for their safety. Reclamation spokesperson Hazel Hill rarely attends the site, and another long-term supporter who wants to remain anonymous doesn't feel comfortable there anymore. Just as in Ipperwash, the failure by police to enforce the law encouraged DC occupiers to become violent against fellow natives. Example number 5. On May 17th, a madman threatened a woman and a child with an AK-47 assault rifle on the occupied Douglas Creek Estates before leaving to shoot a native man at an illegal smoke shop on Highway 6. Nearby Notre Dame School was locked down. Nearby OPP did not attempt to intervene, but instead called for help from the Six Nations police who are miles away. Had the OPP not been prevented from patrolling the provincially owned DCE, it's quite possible that the shooting of the native man would never have occurred. And number 6, this is shocking. On August the 15th, Turtle Island News reported that elected Six Nations Band Chief David General stated that the seized DCE lands are not sacred because 2 rapes and, quote, other unseemly acts had occurred there. Show of hands, how many of you know that there are women being raped on the Douglas Creek Estates? Couple? Yeah. Isn't that awful? It's disgusting. So who's responsible for these crimes against Native people? Who's encouraging the lawlessness? Who is corrupting Native youth into believing that violence is the only solution to rectifying past injustices? Well, just look at their flag, the flag of the Mohawk Warriors, and we happen to have a nice sample right out in the front here. The Mohawk Warriors are involved in weapons smuggling, cigarette smuggling, liquor smuggling, and gambling, as reported by both RCMP and Native websites, as well as other investigative journalists. And contrary to what you may have been led to believe, they are not noble advocates for Natives who are tired of waiting for land claims to be settled. They are an organized crime operation using land claims as a means to further their own corrupt goals. It's pretty tough to give you a sense of exactly what the Mohawk Warriors are about, but I'll try with some quotes. Here's some excerpts from an extensive chronology written by a Native. And this Native was concerned about the impact the Warriors were having on his community. 1989, About 100 members of the Warriors formed the Mohawk Sovereignty Security Force and began a reign of terror that included beatings, drive-by shootings, ramming cars on reservation roads, and thousands of rounds being fired at cars, homes, and opponents of gambling. The Mohawk Sovereignty Security Force served as the private army for the casino owners and the smuggling organizations. March 23, 1990, the traditional Mohawks at Akwesasne set up roadblocks to protest the 8 illegal gambling casinos that were operated by the Warrior Society. They were intent on keeping gamblers out of their territory and were maintained for 33 days. The Warriors reacted by attacking the barricades, and nightly firefights broke out. In April, the Warriors mounted a full-scale assault on the barricades, burned the cars, and bulldozed the roads clear. Several of the protesters were seriously beaten and hospitalized. In fear of the violence, all of the schools in the community were closed. Nightly harassments and drive-by shooting created armed camps on both sides. May 1st, 1990, Harold Edwards and Matthew Pike, shot in the back, are killed in a gunfire between pro and anti-gambling factions at Akwesasne. Pike was trying to rescue Doug George, Akwesasne Notes editor, and his brother from an all-night firefight with the Warriors. The reservation was sealed off by state and provincial police. 2,000 Mohawks leave their community in fear for their lives. By 1994, a gang of warriors and their non-Indian supporters terrorized CANACE. Gun running and drug dealing became the principal activities to support the warrior agenda at Oka. Drug use was out of control among the Mohawk youth. Lawlessness was the arena created by the warriors. And here's the author's take on the role of the warriors in Oka. Quote, during the confrontation at Oka, the warriors took over the agenda and turned it from land rights for the Oka Mohawks to demanding that the warriors be given the right to operate high-stakes bingo. The real reason the warriors moved in on Oka was to protect their gaming at Kanawaki and to spread their gaming operations to other Haudenosaunee communities. In summary, the warriors are in the business of hijacking land claims for their own benefit. The warriors were in Oka, they were in Ipperwash, and they're in Caledonia. According to the same author, the warriors' agenda is to create disruption through violence, threats, and intimidation. OPP two-tier justice policies are based on the false premise that organized criminals speak for honorable Native people and that Native people are willing to live in a lawless world ruled by criminals who take what they want when they want. For more than 15 years, the OPP has been sacrificing the well-being of law-abiding people, both Native and non-Native, for the benefit of sociopaths and demagogues. What does it say to honorable Native parents who try to raise their children to have respect for the rights and the property of other human beings when the OPP so eagerly reward the sociopaths in Native communities for their violence and criminality? How many Native youth have been turned away from productive lives by well-meaning but destructive racial policing policies? How many Native parents have been intimidated into silence by warrior thugs? Thank you. When we become aware of injustice, we have a duty to expose it and to confront it to the best of our ability. Just as we have a duty to speak up for children afraid in their homes on 6th Line, and for a man almost beaten to death in a home he was building for his daughter, we have a duty to speak up on behalf of the Native women who have been raped on DCE, for the woman and child who were threatened by a gunman on DCE, and for the Native man who was eventually shot. Because Non-native media are not reporting that.